sank face down upon the cold wooden floor of the attic, Crum informed me, and lay absolutely still, exhausted by the contentment he had found in that musty paradise. Then the sound of the bells started up again, although Crum could not tell from where it was coming. His body remained unmoving upon the floor in a state of sleepy paralysis, and yet he heard the sound of the jangling bells. Crum thought that if he could just open his eyes and roll over on the floor, he could see what was making the sound of the bells, but soon he lost all confidence in this plan of action because he could no longer feel his own body. The sound of the bells became even louder, jangling about his ears, even though he was incapable of making his head move in any way, and thus shaking the bells on his two-pronged fool's cap. Then he heard a voice say to him, "Open your eyes and see your surprise." And when he opened his eyes, he finally saw his face in the wardrobe mirror. It was a tiny face on a tiny fool's head, and the head was at the end of a stick, a kind of baton, with the stripes on it like a candy cane, held in the wooden hand of Mrs. Pike. She was shaking the striped stick like a baby's rattle, making the bells on Crum's tiny head go jingle-jangle so wildly. There in the mirror he could also see his body still, lying helpless and immobile upon the attic floor, and in his mind was a single consuming thought: to be a head on a stick held in the wooden hand of Mrs. Pike forever, forever. When Crum awoke the next morning, he heard the sound of raindrops on the roof just above the room in which he lay fully clothed on the bed. Mrs. Pike was shaking him gently with her real hand, saying, "Wake up, Mr. Crum, it's late and you have to be on your way. You have business across the border." Crum wanted to say something to the old woman then and there, confront her with what he described to me as his adventure in the attic. But Mrs. Pike's brusque, business-like manner and her entirely ordinary tone of voice told him that any inquiries would be useless. In any case, he was afraid that openly bringing up this peculiar matter with Mrs. Pike would not be something he should do if he wished to remain on good terms with her. Soon thereafter, he was standing with his suitcase in his hand at the door of the enormous house, lingering for a moment to gaze upon the heavily made-up face of Mrs. Pike and secure another glimpse of the artificial hand turned down at her side. "May I come to stay again?" Crum asked. "If you wish," answered Mrs. Pike, as she held open the door for her departing guest. Once he was outside on the porch, Crum quickly turned about face and called out, "May I have the same room?" But Mrs. Pike had already closed the door behind him, and her answer to his question, if it actually was one, was a faint jingle-jangle sound of tiny bells.